The words struck like turbulence. "You don't belong here." They didn't fall softly. They tore across the narrow cabin of the jet like metal scraping against metal. The captain herself, uniform sharp and voice sharper, leaned forward and pointed straight at Marcus Carter's chest. Every passenger within earshot froze mid-breath. Conversations died. Even the hum of the engine seemed to bow to the silence that followed. Marcus didn't move. His frame filled the aisle seat in row 2 Ampere, the very place his ticket had marked. He sat still, calm, eyes anchored on hers. If the captain wanted to rattle him, she'd have to bring more than words. Behind her, 3 men in business suits leaned forward from their leather seats. Their expressions blended curiosity with contempt, as if watching a spectacle rather than a confrontation. One adjusted his cufflinks, whispering something under his breath to the man beside him. Another smirked, phone tilted low, recording without asking. The air inside the cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The captain's finger shook inches from his chest, not from fear, but from a conviction rehearsed too many times. "Move to economy," she snapped. "Now." Marcus's jaw stayed set. His voice, when it came, was low, steady, quieter than hers, but heavier somehow. "This is my seat. 2 Ampere." The line didn't soothe anyone. It sharpened the tension. One of the suited men let out a laugh like static. "Economy is more your style, buddy." His tone wasn't casual. It was loaded. A ripple ran down the cabin. A mother pulled her child closer. A teenager raised his phone higher. Somewhere, a nervous cough cracked the silence. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd seen this scene before years earlier in a hotel lobby where his reservation had been dismissed, in a boardroom where his credentials were doubted, at a dealership where his credit was questioned. Different spaces, same words. Always the same words, "You don't belong." And yet, here he sat, calm, anchored. A storm gathering around him, while he remained the eye. The captain's hand hovered as if ready to physically drag him out. Her authority filled the aisle like a wall, but Marcus stayed exactly where he was, and that defiance, silent, unshaken, became the loudest sound in the cabin. The question wasn't whether he belonged. It was whether anyone in that plane truly understood who was sitting in seat 2 Ampere. Marcus Carter didn't look like a man worth billions. That was the point. A pressed shirt, open collar, plain slacks, no Rolex glinting under the cabin lights, no entourage dragging designer luggage down the aisle. To everyone watching, he was just another passenger trying his luck in a seat that wasn't meant for him. But Marcus knew better. He had built his life on moments exactly like this, moments where appearance and assumption collided like storms on a radar. When he was 24, fresh out of graduate school, Marcus walked into a regional airline office in Chicago wearing his only suit. He had applied for an entry-level analyst position, certain his credentials would speak for themselves. Instead, the manager glanced at his resume, then at his skin, and muttered, "Not the image we're looking for." Marcus walked out that day unemployed but determined. That sting never left him. It became fuel. Now, 2 decades later, that fuel had turned into firepower. He didn't just work in aviation, he owned a piece of it. A quarter stake in Horizon Airlines, purchased through years of deals, mergers, and nights spent running numbers while the world slept. Every flight they operated, every gate they leased, every first-class ticket scanned carried his name in its ledgers. And yet, here he was stripped down to silence, doubted again, forced to prove his worth in a cabin that should have welcomed him. The captain didn't know this history. Neither did the men in suits who sat watching like it was free entertainment. They didn't see the sleepless nights in cramped apartments, the rejections, the battles just to be heard in boardrooms that didn't want him there. All they saw was a black man in an aisle seat, dressed too simply for the world they believed belonged only to them. 1 row back, a young trainee flight attendant clutched her tablet tighter. She had scanned his ticket herself. She knew it had flashed green. She also knew that speaking up now could cost her career. Fear pressed down on her like cabin pressure at 30,000 feet. Across the aisle, a teenage boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, why are they telling him to leave?" The mother shushed him, eyes darting nervously at the captain's stance. But she didn't answer. Marcus sat still, replaying it all. The hotel lobby in Charlotte where, at 16, he was told to wait outside because Guests only. The dealership at 30, where the salesman asked if he had brought his sponsor to co-sign. The bank at 35 that froze his account for suspicious activity after his first $1 million deposit. Same script, same doubt. Different uniforms. He had learned then what he remembered now. Power wasn't about shouting louder. Power was about surviving the silence until the room had no choice but to listen. So he waited, hands folded, eyes steady. The cabin filled with whispers and the glow of recording phones. The captain's authority grew louder, but so did the tension she couldn't control. Marcus Carter hadn't come here to fight for a seat. He had come here to test the system again, and already it was failing right on schedule. The silence didn't last. It never does. From the galley, a second flight attendant stepped forward. Younger, cocky, his badge tilted slightly on his uniform. He sized Marcus up the way a bouncer might size up an uninvited guest. "Sir," he said, voice dripping with disbelief, "economy is 3 rows back. This cabin is reserved." The words carried. Passengers shifted in their leather seats. A ripple of discomfort moved down the aisle, not because they disagreed, but because the line between embarrassment and entertainment blurred. Someone chuckled softly. Another raised a phone higher, angling for the perfect shot. Marcus didn't answer. He just adjusted his shoulders, planting himself deeper into seat 2 Ampere. That silence seemed to enrage them more than any protest could have. The young attendant leaned toward the captain, whispering but not low enough. "He's stalling. Wants a scene." The captain's jaw clenched. Her eyes cut back to Marcus like he was turbulence she couldn't control. She lifted a hand toward the bulkhead phone. "Security to gate B14, she said, calm but decisive. The words carried across the cabin like a verdict. A murmur followed. Passengers exchanged glances. Some nodded approvingly, order being restored. Others frowned, sensing something uglier simmering beneath the surface. Then came the shift. From the jet bridge, a couple stepped into view. Richard and Laura Bennett. Platinum medallion tags dangled from their carry-ons, champagne glasses in hand. Their faces glowed with entitlement. They didn't need to say a word. Their presence announced enough. The captain gestured subtly toward seat 2, Ampere the seat already warmed by Marcus's calm defiance. Richard smirked. "Looks like there's been a mix-up." He didn't address Marcus. He didn't have to. His assumption was louder than words. Laura tilted her glass, her voice soft but slicing. "We were promised this cabin would remain exclusive." The younger attendant grinned like a stagehand watching his cue land perfectly. "See? This is what I mean." He turned back to Marcus. "Time's up. You need to move." The trainee, still clutching her tablet near row 4, stiffened. She had scanned Marcus's boarding pass. She had watched it flash green. She knew the seat was his. But she also knew the hierarchy. Her silence was expected, her obedience mandatory. Marcus finally moved, not rising, not leaving, but leaning slightly forward. His voice was steady, threaded with steel. "I'm not moving." The words didn't echo. They detonated. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll be removed." Marcus sat back, calm as ever, while the Bennetts hovered, certain the seat would soon be theirs. The air grew heavier, tighter, like the cabin itself understood the injustice unfolding within it. Phones rose higher. Whispers turned to quiet commentary. "This is wrong." He showed his ticket. "Why won't they check the system?" And in the midst of it all, Marcus Carter stayed anchored. He wasn't just defending a seat. He was watching the system unravel in real time exactly as he knew it would. The storm was only beginning. The captain waited for movement. None came. Marcus sat as if he were bolted to the leather seat itself, one hand resting lightly on the armrest, the other folded across his lap. His stillness was unnerving. Passengers expected shouting, pleading, maybe even a scene worth posting in full. Instead, all they got was silence, thick, deliberate, suffocating. "Sir," the younger attendant barked again, his voice louder now. "Do not make this harder." Marcus didn't blink. His eyes stayed forward, calm, unshaken. "This is my seat. 2 Ampere." The repetition wasn't for them. It was for the room. A declaration, not a defense. The Bennetts exchanged amused glances. Richard smirked into his glass. "Stubborn type," he muttered. Laura chuckled, shaking her head. "Every year it's the same someone thinking they belong where they don't." Their voices weren't raised, but they carried, slicing through the cabin with the same force as the captain's order. 1 row back, the trainee's grip on her tablet tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell them all the truth, that the scanner had flashed green, that the system had already verified Marcus Carter, but fear pressed down heavier than the altitude outside. She remembered orientation. Do not contradict senior staff in front of passengers, ever. So she stayed silent, the conflict burning behind her eyes. Marcus leaned back slightly, exhaling slow. His posture wasn't defiant, it was deliberate. He wasn't resisting. He was refusing to perform, refusing to give them the spectacle they wanted. Around him, the whispers grew. Why isn't he moving? Maybe he forged the ticket. No one would risk this if they weren't guilty. The cabin became a courtroom, every passenger a juror, every glance a verdict. And still, Marcus remained steady. His silence wasn't weakness. It was pressure, the kind that builds until steel buckles. The captain shifted her stance. Authority was supposed to intimidate, but this man's composure unsettled her more than any outburst would have. She gestured to the bulkhead again, signaling for ground security to hurry. A teenage passenger, phone raised discreetly, whispered to his mother, "He's not yelling. Why are they treating him like this?" The mother hushed him, but her own eyes lingered on Marcus longer than before. Doubt was spreading. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. In that breath, memory returned uninvited. 25 years old, his account flagged suspicious after his first commission check. 32, denied access to a lounge he had more than paid for. 40, dismissed as underqualified before walking into a meeting as the majority shareholder. Different uniforms, same verdict, always the same words, "You don't belong." But every slight had shaped him. Every dismissal had built armor. And now that armor showed itself in silence. He opened his eyes again, steady, unreadable. The hum of the engines filled the gap where his voice did not. The flight crew didn't understand yet. They thought patience was submission. They thought silence was surrender. Marcus Carter knew better. Silence was a weapon. And in this cabin, it was only beginning to cut. The phone cameras came first. They always do. A quiet beep from row 4 signaled the start of a recording. A teenage boy, no older than 16, angled his screen just above the seatback. The red light glowed faintly, catching Marcus's calm profile and the captain's rigid stance. His mother whispered sharply, "Put it down." But the boy shook his head, eyes wide. "This isn't right." 2 rows back, a woman in her late 30s slid her phone out of her purse. She didn't raise it high, just enough to capture the captain's voice as she repeated, "Sir, you will be removed if you don't comply." The recording caught the edge in her tone. A tone passengers had never heard used on the wealthy couple still sipping champagne, waiting for the seat to clear. And then there was Mia, the trainee flight attendant. She stood frozen near the galley, fingers pressed tight around her tablet. Her training screamed, "Stay silent," but her conscience screamed louder. She had seen the green light. She had verified the ticket. She knew this man belonged in 2 Ampere. Her thumb hovered over the tablet's record button. Just one tap, and the whole system log would capture everything. The ticket scan, the seat assignment, the timestamp, evidence, proof. But proof came with consequences. Senior crew could end her career before it began. She hesitated, chest tight, breath shallow. The tension in the cabin swelled. Passengers shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, sensing that the confrontation was sliding into something uglier than protocol. A low murmur rose. "Why don't they just check the system?" "He's not yelling, he's just sitting." "Feels off, doesn't it?" Marcus remained still, but his silence was no longer his alone. It was echoed in the growing unease of strangers who didn't know his name but recognized injustice when they saw it. Then came the first spark. A woman in row 5 spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "He showed his ticket. I saw it." Heads turned. The captain snapped her gaze toward her, sharp as a warning. But the words were out, hanging heavy in the cabin. The teenage boy added, louder this time, "This is discrimination." His voice cracked, but it carried, bouncing off the narrow walls. A ripple of agreement murmured through the rows. Mia's pulse quickened. She tapped the record button. The tablet screen lit up, confirming, "Log initiated." She had done it. Quietly, secretly, but she had chosen a side. The young male attendant noticed her movement. "Stay out of this," he hissed under his breath, eyes narrowing. Mia's grip tightened, but she didn't back away. Across the aisle, another passenger lifted his phone higher. "This is going online," he muttered, almost to himself, almost to the whole cabin. For the first time, the balance shifted. What began as a one-sided order was now becoming a public trial. Every passenger, every whisper, every glowing phone lens added weight to the silence Marcus had held from the beginning. The captain's authority still filled the aisle, but it was cracking. The room wasn't hers anymore. It was watching her, judging her. And in the center of it all, Marcus Carter hadn't moved an inch. The captain's patience cracked like glass under pressure. She pulled the intercom from its cradle, her voice blasting through the cabin speakers. "Attention, passengers. We have an unverified individual attempting to occupy a first-class seat without authorization." The words weren't neutral. They weren't protocol. They were judgment. Gasps fluttered down the rows. Phones lifted higher, recording every syllable. A woman near the bulkhead muttered, "She just called him unverified." That's not even true. Marcus sat still, eyes forward. The accusation didn't pierce him. It confirmed everything he already expected. Then Richard Bennett stood, brushing invisible lint from his tailored jacket. His smile was polished but smug. "Captain," he said loudly enough for the rows behind to hear, "this is why exclusivity matters. Otherwise, anyone could just wander up here." He motioned toward Marcus without looking directly at him, as if addressing a problem rather than a person. Laura Bennett leaned in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We don't mind waiting, of course, but first class should remain first class." She sipped her champagne as though justice were a cocktail served on demand. The young male attendant grinned. "Exactly. Sir, you've embarrassed yourself long enough." He reached toward Marcus's armrest, as if to prod him out of the seat. Marcus didn't move. His hand stayed folded, calm, steady. "Don't touch me." His voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight. The attendant froze mid-gesture, unsettled by the certainty in his tone. The captain stepped closer, inches from Marcus's face now. "You will be removed from this aircraft if you do not comply immediately." The teenage boy who had been filming couldn't hold back. "But he showed his ticket." "I saw it light up green." His voice cracked again, but it rang like a gavel in the tense silence. The captain's glare cut toward him. "Sit down. This doesn't concern you." But it did. It concerned everyone watching. Phones continued to rise, lenses capturing not just the captain's orders, but the smug ease of the Bennett still hovering, waiting to slide into a seat already paid for by another. Mia, the trainee, felt her throat tighten. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Every rule of her training screamed, "Stay silent." But every fiber of her conscience screamed louder, "Speak." Across the aisle, a businessman leaned forward. "Why don't you just run his name? Check the system." The captain's jaw locked. "We don't need to waste resources on fraud." Fraud. The word landed like shrapnel. Murmurs rippled through the rows. Some nodded, others frowned. But the damage was done. Marcus' silence sharpened. He didn't rise, didn't argue. He let the word hang in the air, poisonous and undeniable, so everyone could taste it. Richard Bennett smirked again, lowering himself into the aisle seat just behind Marcus. "Captain, you're too kind. Most places would have thrown him out by now." The insult didn't sting. It confirmed the script Marcus had been reading his entire life. Different uniforms, same chorus. And for the first time, the storm threatened to break. The young attendant's grin hardened into something cruel. He reached down, snatched Marcus's boarding pass from the tray table, and without hesitation ripped it clean in half. The tearing sound cracked through the cabin louder than the engines themselves. Gasps erupted. A woman near row 3 clutched her mouth. Phones tilted upward to capture the act in perfect detail. The slip of paper, his proof, fell in 2 jagged pieces to the floor at Marcus's feet. "Forgery," the attendant sneered. "That's all this ever was." The captain didn't stop him. She nodded as if the destruction confirmed what she already believed. Then she turned back to Marcus, voice sharp as steel. "You are officially considered non-compliant. Security will remove you." From the jet bridge, the shuffle of heavy footsteps echoed, the promise of force. Marcus didn't bend to pick up the torn ticket. He didn't move at all. His hands stayed folded, his gaze steady, as though the entire spectacle was nothing more than a tired performance. Richard Bennett leaned forward with satisfaction, smirk curling across his face. "See? All resolved. You can escort him out now." Laura adjusted her scarf, her tone dripping with condescension. "It's really sad. Some people don't understand their place." The teenage boy in row 4 nearly jumped from his seat. "This is wrong." His voice cracked but carried, slicing the heavy silence. His mother tugged his arm, whispering urgently, but he yanked away, phone raised high. You can't tear up his ticket, that's not protocol. The captain's head snapped toward him. Sit down, or you'll be removed as well. That threat silenced the boy, but only for a moment. The red light on his phone camera glowed brighter than his fear. Then the cabin shifted. A man in a gray suit 2 rows back muttered loudly enough for others to hear. I watched him sit down. I saw the scan. That was his seat. Another woman nodded, murmuring agreement. The tide of witnesses was rising, but authority pushed harder. The captain stepped closer, practically looming over Marcus now. Her shadow cut across his lap like a verdict. Last chance, she hissed. Stand up. Marcus finally moved, not rising, not flinching, but lifting his eyes to hers. Calm, unshaken, his voice cut low and even. This is my seat. You know it. The young attendant scoffed, gesturing toward the approaching footsteps. Not for long. And then the security officer appeared at the doorway, broad-shouldered, expression unreadable. He stepped into the cabin, scanning the scene. Passengers whispered frantically. Phones tilted higher. The drama had crossed into spectacle, into evidence. Mia's hands trembled around her tablet. She had logged everything, the scan, the seat assignment, the timestamp. Her thumb hovered again, ready to submit the file straight into Horizon's compliance system. But fear chained her still. The ripped ticket lay in fragments at Marcus's feet, evidence destroyed, dignity dismissed, force imminent. And yet, Marcus Carter didn't move. His stillness pressed heavier than the cabin air, daring them to try. The cabin braced for force. Security loomed in the aisle, passengers whispered. Phones glowed like 1,000 quiet spotlights. The air was thick, waiting for Marcus Carter to break either in fear or in protest. But Marcus did neither. Instead, he reached into his pocket, calm as if pulling out a pen. A sleek black phone appeared in his hand, its screen glowing against the dim cabin light. He pressed one button, lifted it to his ear, and spoke in a voice steady enough to still the room. Rachel, he said. On the other end, crisp and immediate, came the reply, I'm here. The captain frowned, thrown by the certainty in his tone. The young attendant scoffed. What, calling your lawyer? Cute. Marcus didn't even glance at him. His gaze stayed forward, his voice low but deliberate. Log this. Flight 237, Gate B14, Protocol Flight 7. Notify the board. Passengers stilled, the words sinking like stones in water. Protocol, board. The language wasn't of a passenger stalling for sympathy, it was of someone who belonged in command. Rachel's voice came through sharp, efficient. Understood. Logging now. 3 directors are online. Do you want me to patch? Marcus's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but a line of control. Stand by. The captain's composure faltered. Who exactly do you think you're talking to? Marcus finally looked up, his gaze cutting through her authority like a blade. The people who sign your paycheck. Gasps rippled. Phones tilted higher, zooming in. The Bennetts stiffened, the smirk draining from Richard's face. The security officer hesitated in the aisle, eyes darting between Marcus, the crew, and the growing wall of witnesses. He hadn't touched Marcus yet. Something in the man's composure warned against it. Mia's pulse hammered. She had never heard a passenger speak like that, never seen anyone meet the captain's stare without flinching. Her tablet buzzed, the system log pinged with a new entry. The protocol was real. It was happening. The young attendant tried to laugh it off. Bored? Protocol? He's bluffing. People like him don't. Marcus turned his head slowly, voice cutting through him like cold steel. Finish that sentence. The attendant's mouth snapped shut. The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. It was electric. Every passenger could feel the balance shift, subtle but undeniable. Marcus Carter wasn't resisting removal. He was initiating something far bigger. He lowered the phone slightly, his voice calm enough for the microphones on every recording phone to catch. Ground security touches me, they answered to the board. This plane doesn't leave the gate until I say it does. The security officer froze mid-step. The authority he carried into the cabin was no longer his. It belonged to the calm man in seat 2 Ampere. Marcus exhaled once, slow, measured. For the first time all evening, he wasn't just absorbing injustice. He was dismantling it quietly, precisely, with the weight of an empire no one else in that cabin had seen coming. The storm had officially turned. The cabin buzzed like static before a storm. Every passenger felt that something had shifted, something irreversible. Still seated in 2 Ampere, Marcus held the phone at his side, the line open, Rachel waiting for his word. His calm was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was something heavier, something no one in uniform could command. The captain drew herself taller, doubling down on authority she no longer owned. "Enough games," she snapped. "You're nobody. Sit down in economy or you're off this flight." That was it, the final miscalculation. Marcus stood, slowly, not in anger, not in haste, but with the deliberate gravity of someone who had nothing left to prove. His presence filled the narrow aisle like a tide rising in silence. He looked at the captain, then at the attendants, then at the rows of passengers staring wide-eyed through phone lenses. "My name," he said, his voice calm but resonant enough to carry through the cabin, "is Marcus Carter." The name lingered, unfamiliar to most, but not to all. A murmur rippled down row 6 recognition dawning in fragments. "I am the CEO," Marcus continued, "and 25% owner of Horizon Airlines." Gasps scattered like sparks. Phones jolted higher, trembling as passengers tried to capture every second. The teenage boy nearly dropped his device in shock, whispering to his mother, "He owns it. He owns the plane." The captain's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she stammered, but her words cracked. Authority slipped through the seams of her tone. Richard Bennett's smirk vanished, replaced by a pale, rigid mask. Laura's champagne glass wavered in her hand, liquid trembling against crystal. Marcus took a single step forward, not rushing, not menacing, just enough to close the space where their arrogance once lived. He bent slightly, retrieved the torn halves of his boarding pass from the carpet, and held them aloft. "You ripped up my ticket," he said softly, letting the words hang. Then he lifted the halves higher so the cameras could see. "On a plane I own." Phones erupted in clicks, red lights blinking like warning signals. The security officer, who had been waiting for a cue to act, froze in place. His eyes darted to the captain, but her authority had dissolved in the face of the truth standing before her. Rachel's voice came faint through the phone still in Marcus's hand. "The board is online. They heard everything." Marcus nodded once, his gaze still locked on the captain. "Good. Keep them there." Then he turned not just to her, not just to the crew, but to every soul crammed into the cabin. His words were steady, sharp as a verdict. "The problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated someone you thought didn't matter." A hush dropped heavy over the cabin. For the first time all night, silence belonged to him. The revelation detonated like an engine blast. The captain's lips parted, but no words came. Her authority, once ironclad, slipped through her fingers like sand. The young male attendant who had torn Marcus's ticket stumbled back a step, color draining from his face. His grin had evaporated, leaving only dread. Richard Bennett's confidence shattered in real time. His glass clinked as he set it down too quickly, liquid splashing onto his tailored lapel. Laura whispered sharply, "Richard, we've made a mistake." Phones rose higher, passengers whispered, then laughed in disbelief. "He owns the airline. They tried to throw out the CEO. This is going viral." The teenage boy who had shouted earlier punched the air with vindication. "I knew it." His phone shook as he whispered to the camera. "They tore up the CEO's ticket." Mia, the trainee, exhaled in relief and fear all at once. She had logged the proof, but now she had something stronger validation. Her decision to record wasn't reckless. It was history in the making. The security officer froze mid-aisle, radio slack at his side. He wasn't paid enough to drag out a man who signed the paychecks 2 levels above his chain of command. The cabin pulsed with energy, shock, humiliation, awe. Marcus Carter stood calm at the center, the eye of the storm, while everything around him unraveled. What had started as humiliation was now collapse of arrogance, of bias, of the illusion of control. And every camera made sure the world would see it. The cabin held its breath, waiting to see what the man they had just dismissed would do now that the truth was undeniable. Marcus lifted his phone once more. His voice was steady, cold as steel. "Rachel," he said, loud enough for the nearest passengers to hear, "initiate. Ground this plane. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled like turbulence. The captain blinked hard, as if the words were nonsense, but the color draining from her face betrayed her. Rachel's reply came crisp through the speaker. "Understood. Dispatch notified. Flight 237 flagged as grounded. All systems locked until clearance." The announcement hit harder than any shout could. The entire plane, once scheduled for Los Angeles, was now officially frozen on his word. The captain stepped forward, trying to salvage control. "You can't—" Marcus cut her off, his tone like a blade slicing air. "I can, and I just did. The young attendant who had ripped the ticket staggered backward, whispering, "Oh my God." His hands shook. Marcus didn't pause. "Suspend the crew," he ordered into the phone. "Effective immediately. Access revoked." Rachel's voice returned like a gavel. "Confirmed. Crew IDs disabled. Compliance log updated. HR on standby." The cabin erupted in murmurs. Some passengers laughed in disbelief. Others cheered quietly. The teenage boy whispered to his phone. He just fired the crew. On the spot. The captain tried again, her voice breaking now. "You can't fire my team without due process." Marcus met her eyes with a calm that burned hotter than rage. "Due process is already underway. You'll hear from the board before you hear from me." Richard Bennett, still clutching his champagne, stammered, "We didn't know." Marcus turned his gaze on him, sharp enough to cut. "You didn't need to know. Decency isn't conditional on recognition." Ugh. The words landed heavier than any order. The cabin hushed again, phones catching every syllable. One by one, the pillars of arrogance crumbled. The captain pale, the attendant trembling, the Bennetts shrinking into silence. Every passenger could see the truth now. Power didn't sit in uniforms or champagne glasses. It sat quietly in seat 2 Ampere, waiting for its moment. And when the moment came, it didn't shout. It dismantled. The cabin was no longer a place of quiet entitlement. It was a stage, and every phone was a spotlight. The entire world, through live streams and shaky recordings, was about to witness how Horizon Airlines treated the man who helped build it. Marcus stood firm in the aisle, phone still in hand. The hum of the engines underscored his words. "This plane is grounded," he repeated, calm but absolute. "And so is every career that made the mistake of thinking silence meant weakness." The captain's face blanched. The young attendant who had torn the ticket couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Even Richard and Laura Bennett, once dripping with smugness, sat frozen, their champagne untouched. Then Marcus turned not to them but to the passengers, to the mothers clutching their children, to the teenager holding his phone like a torch, to Mia, the trainee whose tablet still pulsed with the log she had dared to keep. "You all saw it," Marcus said, his voice carrying down the narrow cabin like a verdict. "Not because of who I am, but because of who they thought I wasn't." Gasps gave way to silence, then to something heavier. Every passenger felt it. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about every door closed, every assumption made, every moment someone in power decided another human being didn't belong. Marcus lowered his phone, the line still open. "Rachel, confirm final." Rachel's voice cut sharp and sure through the speaker. "Confirmed, crew suspended, incident log, media monitoring live." A wave of murmurs surged. The teenage boy whispered, almost reverent, "He just did it. He grounded the plane." Marcus exhaled, then looked directly into the lens of one passenger's phone, as though addressing not just the cabin but everyone watching beyond it. His tone was steady, deliberate, a closing statement. "The problem was never that you didn't know my name. The problem is how quickly you dismissed me when you thought I didn't matter. That ends tonight." The line landed like thunder. For a moment the cabin held still, electrified by the weight of it. Then came the applause, tentative at first, then swelling. Hands clapped, voices rose, the sound filling every corner of the aircraft. Mia stepped forward, tablet in hand, her voice trembling but resolute. "He belongs here, and I stand with him." The passengers echoed, "We do too." Phones caught every word, every clap, every expression of solidarity. The captain's authority had dissolved into silence. The crew's smirks had collapsed into shame, and Marcus Carter, the man they had tried to erase, now stood unshakable at the center of it all. He didn't need to raise his voice. Justice didn't arrive with volume. It arrived with presence, with truth, with power that no one could deny once it stood revealed. And in that moment, every person in that cabin understood. Marcus Carter hadn't just grounded a plane. He had grounded a system that thought it could still get away with pretending he didn't belong.